Ma'am, it's pretty good.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Clover Garden School Board of Directors meeting on May 13th, 2025 at 6:32 p.m. Call this meeting to order. Ms. Veraken, role of the board and mission.
We're entrusted to care for the current school and stay focused on the vision for the future school. No trust, no unity, no progress. Mission of Clover Garden School. Clover Garden School will foster community, generate enthusiasm, challenge students academically, and produce successful citizens.
Thank you. Has everyone had a chance to review tonight's agenda? Any updates or changes we need to make to the agenda? I have a motion to approve this evening's agenda. Ms. Lane, second. Ms. Gould, all in favor? Has everyone had a chance to review the April 8th, 2025 minutes? Were there any corrections or additions? Do I have a motion to approve the April 8th? Ms. Foster, second. Ms. Russell, all in favor? Thank you. Ms. Veraken, do we have any public comment this evening?
No, ma'am.
Thank you. Takes us to finances. So the April 2025 budget approval, Ms. Simmons, any comments on the April 2025 budget? No,
ma'am.
no.
Sorry.
Ms. Lane, have you had a chance to review?
Yes, I have.
Any
No
issues,
comments or-
concerns? No comments. Okay. So I have a motion to approve the April 2025 budget. Ms. Lane, second. Mr. Russell, all in favor? I can't.
He was like, oh, yeah.
I'm sorry. Mr. Young.
You know what?
I was looking at
Pretty young.
Okay. Consolidated grant approval.
Yes, ma'am. I like, for the board to make a motion, to authorize Ms. Heather Veraken to submit the consolidated grant on behalf of the school board,
What is the consolidated grant?
IDEA and Title I.
ID, okay. Do we have questions on the consolidated grant? We have a motion to approve Ms. Veraken submitting on behalf of the school. Ms. Lane, second. Ms. Merle, all in favor? Thank you. Academics, principals update. Ms. Spencer, Dr. Morris, who's going first tonight?
I'm gonna start things off. We have some special teachers here, the heart of our school. And so we're gonna start off with high school in our science department, just to kind of let you know what's going on, and then we'll go into our report after third grade presents.
All right, thank you for having us tonight. I'm Elizabeth Dahl and this is Tracy Leach, and we are a high school science teachers. We just kind of want to give you a glimpse into what our kids do and what our kids experience in science. So I'm going to start out with my earth and environmental science class. You can see here on the right, they're going to learn so much about soil, so much more than they ever wanted to know about soil. I love soil personally. And so here they are learning to texture soil. So they're going to learn all about like how to texture it by hand, and then they can look at the soil survey. So like they brought in a sample of soil, and so they're going to texture it. They're going to figure out it's a thin clay loam, and then they're going to go to the soil survey and they're going to see if they are right. So why does soil matter? You can know here that soil matters so much because we can just see building this school how important soil is and how our septic system works and how all of that. So we just kind of instill that in the kids and teach them about that. Here, this is, I think, their favorite project. It was new this year. But I taught them about the albedo effect. So like dark colors are going to absorb, more sunlight, the energy from that, and then it's going to give it off as infrared radiation. And so they picked like a place to build this house. So like they chose Canada. And so if you notice, they're going to use darker colors to then absorb more of that. And then inside, they even, like inside the house, there's darker colors. And so they then will take the temperature of the inside of the house and the outside of the house and then compare it, and they can see how important like color is when you're building. Sorry, I'm nervous. Okay, so here we have they're doing topography map. And so they take these, they build them out and then they slice it up and then they measure and then they create this map. And then what was really cool this year is then we got to look at the topography map for here at Clover Garden School. And they could go and hike the trails and they could see how when the lines are closer together, it means it's steeper. And so like here, as we head down the trail, it's really steep. And so then they can make that correlation, which was pretty cool. The kids love to eat. So anytime I can throw food in there, this is a cookie mining lab. So what they did is I taught them all about mining and the effects like on the environment. And so then they take their cookie and they have to choose like, am I going to use which substrate? So is it going to be a hard cookie, a soft cookie? What is it? And then they have to mine out the chips. But they get to learn what the EPA is. So I'm the EPA and I walk around and if there is a bit of morsel in a stream, oh honey, that's $10,000. Like, but then we learn about reclamation and having to put it back. So then when I tell them, you destroyed your cookie, you got all this ore, you are making money, now put it all back. Because that is what you have to do. So little things like that, I think help solidify and they have fun. And then they got to eat all the leftover cookies, which are super exciting. This one, we learned about pollution, particulate matter. So like all the little stuff floating in the air. So they made these little collectors, they put them all over the school. Then we collected them a couple days later, they put them under the microscope and they get to see all the, and then they count it and then we do math, which they're not, they don't like that, but that's okay. And then, and then they get to see like, what is it that's in our building? What are we breathing? So a lot of this stuff you can't see. And so they're like, ew, gross, here's a hair. And they find all sorts of stuff. But it's not, it's like it fibers, but anyway. Okay. Now I'll calm down. I gotta work it out.
Great. One of my classes is anatomy and physiology. It's an honors class, and this is our first year teaching that at Clover Garden, or offering that at Clover Garden. We've done a lot of labs, but I mostly put pictures of our dissections that we've done. We've done 7 dissections, and we just finished our capstone one. We started out very simple, doing dissection of a pickle, so they could get used to their dissection tools. And then we went into the muscular system, so that these pictures are dissecting a chicken wing, and that was really interesting. I got to manipulate the muscle and make the chicken wing arm shoot up. And then they can manipulate the tricep in the back and make it shoot back down. They really like that. And then we went on to dissect cow eyeballs, sheep hearts, sheep brains, pig kidneys, and we just did our capstone on a fetal pig. So that's the picture on the left. You can see the entire fetal pig. We went through the systems. We went through the whole pig system by system. It took us 3 days. Cooler full of ice is helpful if you're ever planning on doing that, because by the 3rd day it was a little rank. They I don't know. So this class started out with 24 kids, and some of them did not have any interest in taking anatomy, but they really powered through. And we had 5 kids that needed to go sit down the hall on that 3rd day. Other than that, they did really good.
This is why we stay in our lanes, because like when she was doing it, I just walked past the door. I'm like, yeah. Okay, so this is AP Environmental Science, and they actually took their AP exam today. They came out and they were like, it was great. So hopefully our scores come back really well. Last year we had 93% pass rate. The global and national pass rate is 54%. Wow. So these kids, man, they love this stuff. So, or some of them hate it, but they do anyway. I really appreciate it. Okay, so these are eco columns. This is something that we work on for months. It's long-term data. So what you have is you have your terrestrial here. They're going to grow plants. They usually choose legumes. Legumes fix nitrogen, and so then they are able to then test over and over the nutrients and the nitrogen levels, and you can see how they lower as the plants grow. On and on. They put detributors in there like worms and stuff. So anyway, this is going to grow. and then it sits on top of a filter chamber, and that is going to filter out. So when they pour the water in, they actually pour the fish water in up here. It filters down through the filter chamber, and then at the bottom we have fish, egg fish. So we use the beta fish because they can deal with low dissolved oxygen. But the whole entire time they're testing everything. They're looking at nitrates, nitrites. They're looking at dissolved oxygen, pH, temperature. They're measuring all these things, and then at the end they have to graph, lots of graphing. And they keep an eye out on the dissolved oxygen level so that their fish don't die. And then they learn a range of tolerance. They go through our fish, we make sure if the dissolved oxygen ever goes too low, we take them out, and then somebody takes them home. But anyway, so this is one of the things that they do that takes a long time. We did get a grant for water testing. So this is our class down by the creek. This property is such a gift. It is such a gift to be able to take these kids out there and they get to live and see everything that I teach. So I love this land. So this is down by Buttermilk Creek. So we went down to the creek, they took creek water out and they tested it for, everything from nitrates, copper, just the whole slew of things. And it's actually, it was a little high in copper, but not anything outside of the EPA standards. But they love this and they got to see, hey, we've got great water. So then we tested a couple more spots, and then they tested like the water here from the building, and then they tested the water from my home, which my well water is the worst water. Just so y'all know, y'all's water is great. My well, not so much. But anyway, again, they're just learning to, it's just preparing them for college, going out and having to test and then take your data, analyze your data. So super fun.
One of my other classes is biology. So this is a state required class for graduation. There is a state EOC at the end of it. This year, the state has they rewrote the entire standards for biology. And it's broken down into 4 sections. So most classes, I think, have 2 or 3 check-ins. We have 4. We just took our 4th one at the beginning of May. I'm so proud of these kids, even the standard class and the honors class. Our proficiency on all 4 check-ins ranged from somewhere in the 87th percentile to the 100th percentile. Our 3rd one on genetics, we had 100% proficient. So it was really amazing. I don't know how many labs I've done with these kids, but I love hands-on science. So in the picture on the left, we took phenolphthalein and put it in a bromothymol blue and put it in water, and it turns green if it is acidic. They blew carbon dioxide into it and they watched. So it's to teach them that carbon dioxide in the air mixes with the water and creates carbonic acid. So their water turned yellow. And then the picture on the top, they took that water that they had turned yellow, put it into 4 different test tubes. They put a sprig of plant in 2 of them, and then wrapped one with a plant and one without a plant in aluminum foil and put it under grow lights and let it sit for 2 days. And then they could see that the one with the plant that was exposed to the light turned back blue because the plant did photosynthesis, took the carbon, converted it back from carbonic acid, back into carbon dioxide in the top part of the test tube. So that was really interesting. Next year, maybe we can get the lab costs for one of them to have a fish in it or something that's doing cellular respiration so they can see how that works. And then that bottom picture of the green thing, that is one that we just did, has nothing to do with photosynthesis cellular respiration lab, but from our fall festival, money that we raised, one of the things that we bought were these electrophoresis chambers, which is some really cool biotechnology equipment. So these kids did a lab, and I should have taken better pictures, but that's the one I have. So it was a crime scene investigation, and they collected crime scene off the floor and off the table at a crime scene, and then they had 3 different suspects. So they created a DNA fingerprint from this. So you can see this is DNA from the table, this one's from the floor, and then there are 3 suspects, and they have to determine which suspect matches the DNA from the crime scene, so they know which criminal to arrest. This is really cool equipment. More of an AP biology thing, but from biology honors class. They're really smart cookies, so we gave it a try last week, and that is what we came up with. One of the other labs that we did was this Homer of Simpsons, because a lot of them didn't know who Homer Simpson was, so we kind of turned it into a minion lab. But they had clear solo cup, and they punched a hole in the bottom of it, and they drew a picture of Homer or a minion on it, and they had this glucose solution, which was just yellow food color in the water, and they had to so they had to fill their minion up to above the top of the minion. They had to keep him yellow. And it was, so they had to do this lab. So he's constantly draining water because they poked a hole in the bottom of their cup. They have to keep filling them up, but they have to keep his blood sugar normal. So they have this extra cup of this really dilute yellow food color and stuff. They also have hot water and cold water. They have to keep his water balance regulated. They have to keep his temperature balanced, and they have to keep his blood sugar balanced. They're constantly adding hot and cold water, but then the yellow gets too dilute, so they have to add more sugar, and he's constantly losing fluids. And anyway, they had to keep him alive for 20 minutes, I think. So it was really interesting. And then we did an egg osmosis. So we took eggs, even though they're like $12 a dozen. We took eggs and we soaked them. Some of them got soaked in water, and some of them got soaked in, well, we soaked them all in vinegar first to eat away the shell, so they could see the cell membrane of the egg. It's supposed to represent the cell membrane of a cell. And then we soaked that part in plain water and in taro syrup and water for 48 hours, and saw how the water in the egg moved in and out of the egg, which is a large version of how it actually happens in the cell.
All right, so the next one is Envirocon. Envirocon is an elective that is taught here. They told me today we had over 80 kids that have never taken it before that signed up to take it. Unfortunately, have a class of 24. But anyway, so part of the reason they love it is we go outside and everything we study wildlife. So we track animals out here. We found bobcat, we found coyote tracks, we found deer, raccoon, possum, but we actually get out in it. If you follow this trail a little bit more, you're going to see where the beavers have done their job, and you can see how they've eaten away, and then this one's dead, and that was anyway. So it's like we get to go out and they get to see all of this. We tested the soil from over here, but pretty much everything I teach, I get to come out here and they get to experience, and so that is one of the reasons why they love Envirocon. But it is also, Envirocon is a competition. So over 30 kids tried out this year. They have to take a test in order to make a team. Once they make a team, then we start training. Next year, we're going to do it way earlier. But this is the Mozzarella Knights. They won first place at the Area 3 Envirocon. This is the B team. They named themselves that because they thought they would beat them. But anyway, they got so the B team. Sorry, guys. And then these are our senior citizens. They did come in 6th, which made them go to state. But I have to say, out of these kids, 3 of them are going into environmental science. She is going to NC State and she is studying environmental science. He is going to UNCW studying coastal engineering. He is going to end up going and studying soil science. That's my son. He's doing political science. I don't know. And we have one of Cheek's, math students here going to study math, but our senior citizens, they've stuck it out. Some of these kids have done this with me for over 7 years and made it to state. But these kids beat out the early college at Guilford. They beat out the early college at Randolph to secure these places. So they study so hard, and I'm so proud of them. This is us at the state competition. All of us back here are these tents that they have to do oral presentations. They get a problem that they have to solve, and then they stand in front of judges. These people are professionals that do all of this for a living, and these kids have the courage. They stand up there, they do their presentation. We didn't win this year, but every year we do get better. And so I appreciate these kids so much.
That brings us to chemistry. Chemistry is a year-long class. I just counted, we have done over 30 labs in chemistry this year. And I cannot begin to tell you what all they are, because they just kind of all blend together, and I don't take pictures of half of them. But we learned a lot about acid-base indicators, and this one is conservation of mass. They it baking soda and vinegar, and they had to capture the mass in a balloon. So even though a chemical reaction occurred, the mass didn't escape into the air as carbon dioxide. More conservation of mass and, yeah, I think I put a lot of the same pictures. This one's elephant toothpaste. We made elephant toothpaste. It demonstrated endothermic reactions and how it got really hot. So they dumped their hands in it, and then they could feel how warm the elephant toothpaste got because it's an endothermic reaction. We did, this one is the molarity of Kool-Aid. So they had different concentrations of Kool-Aid mixed in them, and some of them were super concentrated and some of them are really watered down, and the ones that are super concentrated, they like put a whole packet Kool-Aid in a little 4-ounce cup, and they said it was really nasty. But we did one about equilibrium. So they had 2 different diameter straws, and anyway, we learned about the rate of change and how to reach equilibrium, the rate of change is constant, but not necessarily equal. And then in physical science, we do lots of math, and they don't like math. But anyway, in this lab, they really like this lab. So they were given a recipe to make fudge. We try to make it fun, even if we have to do math. So they were given a recipe to make fudge, and they had to do dimensional analysis and scientific notation problems to figure out exactly how much powdered sugar and milk and chocolate that they had to put in their fudge. So it might have been something like 6.04 times 10 to the negative 8 milliliters, and they had to convert that into teaspoons and do the scientific notation. So we started them out on dimensional analysis. They came a long way. They actually got all the measurements right, so that their fudge tasted really good, and they got to eat and they like fudge. This one we did, it was a balloon rocket lab. So we set up meter sticks on both sides of the table and ran a string along the end. They had a straw that went, string went through the straw, and they taped a balloon, and they had to see how far the balloon would shoot and how long it took it to get there. And then they attached different things to the balloon. So if the balloon had more mass, how did that affect the velocity and the force behind? And anyway, they had a really good time with that. Thank God COVID is over and we can spray some of it from a balloon.
Right.
And then the last thing is not a class, but it's just a club. But we do have a robotics club here. We started out with heroes, or like these little balls that are robots, and then they moved on to our Lego EV3s. We don't compete yet, maybe in the future. We'll see. But this is just a little glimpse of kind of what we do. It's really important to us that the kids enjoy coming to class. So when we want them to say, I can't wait to go. So anyway, thank you for listening. Thank you.
Good job. So next we will hear from Arthur, the community ladies ready.
All right, so I am going to start you off with the inspiration of what we wanted to discuss tonight. So Miss Savage sent me this TikTok a couple months ago, and I said, wow, nail head. And it led me to some further investigating about some things, and then we brainstormed what we thought might be some simple fixes, along with maybe some professional development we could look into for next year and just ways to improve. And then some things that we did at a 3rd grade level. Uh-oh. Hang on, let me try and do it like this.
I think that you guys don't know what's going on in education right now. That's fine. Like, how could you know unless you were working in it? But I think that I think you need to know. So here is exactly what it's like right now working in public education. First of all, the kids have no ability to be bored whatsoever. They live on their phones and they're just fed a constant stream of dopamine from the minute their eyes wake up in the morning until they go to sleep at night. Because they're in a constant state of dopamine withdrawal at school, they behave like addicts. They're super emotional, like the smallest thing sets them off. And when you are standing in front of them trying to teach, they're vacant. They have no ability to tune in if your communication isn't packaged in short little clips or if it doesn't have like bright flashing lights. It's actually the way harder part for me than just the outright behaviors. It's just being up at the front, talking to a group of kids who have their eyes open, they're looking at me, but they're not there. They're not there. And they have a level of apathy that I've never seen before in my whole career. Punishments don't work because they don't care about them. They don't care about grades. They don't care about college. It's like you are interacting with them briefly in between hits of the internet, which is their real life. I've seen some TikToks recently where teachers are getting a lot of hate, like for not adapting to the kids or punishing them or whatever. And I just got to say, like, I can tell you with absolute certainty, it is not the teacher's fault. It might be the parents' fault. It might be our capitalistic society's fault, but it is not the teacher's fault.
So I don't believe in 100% of that. But it just kind of, sorry, sparked some interest in me. So I started thinking, like, if we don't do things differently, we're not going to get any different results. And I've noticed over the course of since COVID, and we can't blame it on COVID anymore because the group we have this year are not COVID babies, but since COVID, like every year we're losing these kids more and more. Like the lack of care is not there. The lack of wanting to try or wanting better, or it's just not there. And so I found this article as I was doing some research about it, and I just want to talk about a couple things. So there was this guy called, his name is Dr. Bill Daggett, and he came to the Alexander County Schools. And he spoke to the audience of the faculty, the teachers, and the parents, saying it was a night thing. And some highlights I took from the article, modern youth brains are developing differently due to the increased screen time in their childhood compared with use of only 10 or 20 years ago. Scans of their brains have shown a smaller hippocampus region. This region of the brain is responsible for all these things, and which is why we're starting to see a lack in this in the classroom. And he went on to say, this is not a curriculum issue. He wasn't suggesting that we change the curriculum, but we need to change our instructional practice and our design. And so like what y'all are doing, wonderful, because it is, you know, kind of what he's saying is we are going to have to become more of a society that teaches differently, more hands-on. Like in another part, he said that we're seeing increased deficits in interpersonal skills, self-leadership skill, integrity, self-control, risk-taking. And one point that he made that I thought was a good point was AI, whether we like it or not, is coming at us like a tidal wave. If you can write an algorithm for any task, they can do it faster, more efficiently than any human being. Anything that is predictable, you can write that for. But what do employers need? They need kids that can deal with unpredictable situations where they have to use problem-solving skills and deeper decision skills and creativity. When they get out of that environment of something that's predictable, it throws them for a loop. They're very black and white. And so here were some simple ways that we thought maybe at the school level that we could do some things to maybe increase desire and motivation to learn. We used to do quarterly awards at school where we celebrated honor roll and character. I would love to see us bring that back because I think it's a real motivator when you see your classmates getting called up there all the time, you know, and I know we do things, you know, like the donuts and things, but they're not everybody is seeing that. Just the kids that are winning that are seeing that. Kids are competitive by nature and they need others to be celebrated they need to see that for intrinsic motivation.
And just to interrupt you just a little bit, that's one of the things that I've really noticed over the years is that I used to have classes that were so competitive with each other. I mean, they would, we would have a test and it was like, and now I have a little bit of that, like in one of my classes, but overall it's not. It's like I'm at a 45. I'm like, how would you want to announce my announcement?
Right.
I just don't see that competition between them of kind of like striving for something. Like I want to, like I just I was in school too. Like I want to make the best grades. I want to be at the top of the class. I want that recognition. And I think it's maybe because maybe we don't give them all the recognition.
So our fourth quarter, we were tasked with coming up with an I Ready celebration. And so that was a huge motivator for our group and they loved it. And I think, you could across the board pay 5 say that was a huge thing. So maybe doing something quarterly for that. Maybe a higher focus on student leadership, starting in elementary school with things such as class officer positions, service learning projects, peer tutoring, bringing back some reading buddies, teaching and reaching differently depending on the student grouping, which Ms. Savage will talk about a little bit more. And then some ideas for PD are on the following slides.
So, hi, I'm Ashley Ellis. I'm actually an alumni from Clover Garden, and a lot of the things that they were talking about, like the celebrations and stuff, those are core memories that I have, like K-12. Like my son attends Clover Garden. I want him to have those same core memories because that's what I loved about Clover Garden growing up. Like it was a second home to me, and it still is. But so I was tasked with the idea of like, what can we do for professional development? How can we reach these kids on their level? Well, I'm a big gamer. I like to game, and so do these kids. So one of the things that I found was a professional development that talks about Gamify. And so Gamify is a secondary literacy. It's a program focused on engaging secondary students with game mechanics to enhance their literacy and content learning. It's a great program, open to grades K through 12, and especially with the younger kids, with how much more I'm seeing kids on devices and not outside. I feel like this will kind of get their attention more because there's been plenty of times when we're doing iReady and my kids are like, after 2 lessons, can I do learning games? And I'm like, let's see what you got on those 2 lessons first. This was another type of thing that I found online. It's called EduPlay, and basically it's kind of like Blooket or Kahoot, but it can take your lesson within like a minute and turn it into like a whole interactive game that the kids can do. There's assessments, there's like follow-ups, there's things that can challenge them, stuff to meet them on their level. I thought this was pretty cool. And another thing that we've noticed is that these kids cannot sit still at all. Like there's more times during the day that my kids fall out of their seat than are in their seat because they're just fidgeting constantly. I don't know why this isn't working. But anyway, it was called the active classroom movement to enhance learning. So it's basically to get the kids up and moving and engaged in their learning versus having to stay in a seat all day long. Because even I know as an adult, when we have to sit in meetings for 2 hours at a time, by like the hour mark, I'm like, okay, I need to move. Like I'm getting stiff.
And that's also an NCAT. So, and I don't know if some of you know, but NCAT is a free thing for the state of North Carolina educators. They spoil you. And so our kind of premise is it would be great if maybe we could do K2, pick one to go, and 3-5 and 6-8, and then we all come back and teach everybody else what we learned.
And then one last resource that I found was the K2 literacy with iPad Magic. Since our K2 students do have access to iPads, this is just another interactive way for them to learn and become engaged. it's recommended just for K2, but I feel like it could be expanded into more, especially if you have kids like that are a couple grade levels behind. This could kind of help them catch up as well. And then the last thing I had was student-centered learning. So just basically focusing on the kids' needs and meet them where they're at and find different creative ways to keep them engaged where we're not just standing up at front and talking at them. Like their hands are in something, they're doing something, and they can bring that home and like tell their parents what they've done. Because there's plenty of times I ask my son, like, hey, what'd you do at school today? And he's like, I went to recess. You know, I had PE today. I'm like, well, okay, what'd you do in the classroom? I can't remember. So it's just, if I feel like if there's more experiences, it's more something that they're gonna remember and take away. Like there's still some lessons that have stuck with me, like Miss Wilson was my 8th grade social studies teacher. And I remember her talking about the Revolutionary War and her telling us that basically they were singing, "We're not gonna take it" by Twisted Sister. Never forget that. Like that. But yeah. So going along with some findings that we have found.
So it's getting a little tense in the 3rd grade now. I feel like it's getting a little stressful, because we felt like we were teaching and we were putting all this effort in, and we were just getting crickets back, just like expression. So it was getting harder and harder and harder to teach. Of course we had classes with a mix of students. We had like the high achievers, and then we had the kid that falls out of his seat all the time, in the same classroom. And it's a challenge. It's a real challenge. It's a challenge not to lose everybody. Okay. Because when you slow down enough, then these kids that want to fly, well, they're just having their own conversation, their own meeting over here. But if you try to go to their pace, then, you got like more than one falling out of the chair and they're over here, and, it's 12 are going to the bathroom. And so it's really hard to keep that together. And we thought, okay, well, this is the opportunity for small groups. This is where everybody says small groups. This is where small groups are just going to be the winner. But we found out even with the small groups, 75 minutes in a class period, the group that you pull back to work with you, that just leaves the other ones out there. And it's kind of the same thing as we're going too fast or we're going too slow. And again, kind of that indifference to consequences is like, okay, I want this table to sit and work quietly, and we're not going to get up. And if we get up, then we're going to have to walk some laps at recess. They will all be up. They will all be game for walking laps at recess. And we saw lunch, anything that we thought, would be a consequence for behavior. They were like, no problem. Yeah. So in February, we decided to regroup our classes. We based them on ability levels. So we had high, medium, and low. Okay, nothing too out of the ordinary. And we had reservations about doing it, but it was so hard to reach everybody, and we were really concerned about parent comments on that, and we did not get a single parent. Nobody picked me.
No complaint.
McDonald's, which was huge for us. But we've been able to accomplish so much more with this, because we've been able to teach each group differently. We've gone at a different pace. We've used different resources with different classes. We've had different assignments. They've had different homework, might have had different assessments. Even the way we teach is different. My high flyers, I can stand there and I can explain it. We can model it on the board, and I'm like, okay, go. And they'll group up and they'll work, and it's great. I have to break it down in much smaller pieces for my lower group. But so our groups were our high group, they're the SEALs. They move at a very fast pace. They've been engaged, they've been challenged. I know that I stretched them into 4th grade. So they've done a lot of 4th grade work this year, or the second half of this year. The Lemurs are our middle group, and they have pretty much been able, they worked on grade level, and they pretty much follow the pacing guide. You know, they're pretty much on track with what we would have done with the whole class. Our elephants, our lower group, we've slowed the pace of instruction for them. We have done a lot of teaching from second grade standards. We've modified assessments, modified assignments for them. And when I say we've done second grade standards, it's a little different in math and reading. For Miss Long, it's the same standards for second and third grade, but it's the level of difficulty that changes. For math, I do have different standards in third grade. So I've had to make sure that they're exposed to everything, that they see all the third grade work, and we'll go over the third grade work, but then we'll take a step back and say, okay, what do we really need to be able to do this? And we'll have to take a step back and hit some of the second grade standards and work our way back up to it. Do we get to master all the third grade standards with that group? No, we don't. We cover the material, we expose them to it, we get them to interact with it, but we have to do a lot of backing up to try to get them there.
To go off what she said about teaching second grade standards, after Christmas, I started doing foundations with them, which is like Letterland, for the first 15-20 minutes of class every single day, even with the seals, lemurs, elephants. Like they said, I hit different pieces with each one. Of course, the seals, I started with the higher units. With the elephants, I started with unit 1, and we worked through. And they did good with it. There was a little pushback a little bit at first when I started doing it, but once they realized why I was doing it, it was okay.
The only reason they're the seals and the lemurs and the elephants, those are the first letters of our last name.
Yeah.
Seals. With me at the end of the day, that's the only way I can keep up with their schedule. Those seals are on my schedule. My schedule.
Simplicity.
They were S, L, and E the morning we were getting ready to implement this, and then Long flies in the door. It's like, what if there's seals and lemurs and elephants? Oh my God.
I'll make you
Some other observations we made after grouping them like this, and it took a little while, but not like it just blew our minds. The difference in attendance. The difference in attendance is night and day. The seals, the high flying group, they're always here. They're always here. When I look at my grade book, I've got all their work. They don't have missing work. If they are out, they get that work, they do that work. My lemurs, kind of right down the middle, they're out, they're here, they're back there. Most of their work I have. The elephants are out all the time. My elephants are out a lot. They have a lot of missing work. I have, my secret code in my grade book, so I know that when they came back, I handed it to them, marking my grade book like that, and they're like, I don't know, I've never seen it before in my life. Put down the code right here. Okay, but I have a ton of missing work from those kids, even down to behavior and office referrals. It's not with seals, okay? It was really, especially the missing work and the attendance really stood out. We weren't expecting that, not at all. But I guess just to see it all together, it really stands out. And this, sorry, it's conglomeration of stuff. These are our grouping. This is math, because this is just math. Okay. And this first picture, these are the iReady scores for the 3 groups, the 3 iReadies. Okay. So you can see in the first one, there's just a lot of pink and a lot of yellow. Okay. So these are our eldest. This is our lower group. Okay. But we can see that they grew. Then you've got your lemurs in the middle. Okay. So they're going from the second grade level, and you see a lot of them make that jump to green at the end of the year with the 3rd iReady. They're jumping to 3rd grade level. Okay. And then got your seals on the end, where some of them started off in 2nd grade, which is fine, which is where you start at 3rd grade, but they've all bounced up to mid 3rd grade. So we can see kind of, first of all, it was a relief to know that we did group them well, and we were pretty spot on.
There was a few
There were
really good in math, and I'm like, so we had to meet in the middle,
right, we did.
but not many.
Right. I had some really high math that were struggling more in reading. And then the closest one to me, these are my check-ins. This is kind of my gold standard. This is the thing that I look at. You know, yeah, my elephants, they are still in the pink. They are not passing the check-ins. The check-ins are our third grade standards, and they're not easy. The people that write the check-ins write the EOG questions. So it's certainly a predictor for them. They've improved, they've come up, but think about it, they're working on a first and a second grade level. So, it's not realistic for me to expect them to take a check-in, a challenging check-in on third grade work when they're still working on second grade level. Okay. And then again, you can see my lemurs, they're coming up, they're jumping up. And then on the end, you've got the seals, where some of them had to have some type of come to Jesus situation or pizza there. I don't think some of them had ever made anything that would have been coated pink before, so there was a little panic. But you can see they've jumped up, and they're on track. So it's really interesting to look at their scores together to see, yes, they're growing. And I think they've grown a lot since the second half of the year. To me, one of the best indicators is the high group, is the SEALs. On their iReady, sometimes it is hard to grow that group. Okay. It's easier to see growth in your low group, your medium group. Sometimes that high group, it's hard to push them enough to grow. But actually for iReady, my SEALs, the high group, they actually grew the most out of the three classes. They grew on average.
I really think it was the switch.
Yeah, they grew on average 33 points from the beginning of the year. Whereas the lemurs grew about 26 points and 29 points on the elephants. So it was nice to see that high group grow, because they come in high and sometimes it's hard to challenge them enough for them to show that growth.
We also noticed the attitudes in the different groups as far as their grades, missing work. Like today, for example, I had several of the SEALs come to me, hey, am I missing anything? Can I see what my final grade is? Elephants, I started naming missing work, and several of them didn't even crack open their binder. And when I called them over to say, hey, you currently have a 35 in here, you might want to look in your binder and see if you got any work. My grades are due tomorrow. Oh, I left it at home. Like, there's no care. If my teacher told me that when I was a child, I'd be sweating bullets knowing my mom was coming after me. Like, there's just no care.
I don't think there's no care to them, but maybe not as much emphasis is put on it. Because I do think in each of the three classes, in each of the three groups, you still kind of have your leaders in each group, and you have your kids that are good anchors, that they're a good one to put somebody that's struggling with a certain skill. They're a good one to help and a good one to kind of coach. So I think that, even in all three groups, there are certain people who, they do have that empathy, and if they understand something, they're excited about it and they want to share and they want to help somebody else with it. So I think it's, important to kind of make sure that those kids have support and let them help somebody, because kids speak is sometimes much better than teachers speak, if you understand. So some of our final thoughts on that group and our students by ability was a huge success for us. We were able to differentiate our instruction to meet our students' needs and to make them more successful. Group and our students by ability made it evident that changes are needed for instruction styles. With the groups the way they are, we have groups that would benefit from more breaks and short bursts of instructions. Then there's that other group where they can really, they can handle like some lecture, some I do it, you practice it. And then they're ready to practice the skill, and they're ready to take that skill and apply it to an extension activity or to going on to fourth grade work. So it's really helped us, I feel like, grow all three groups.
But it just goes back to say that, like, you can't keep teaching the way we've been teaching. That's a whole lot of red. And we can't have that. It's disheartening. So something needs to change, you know, with at least all the red babies. So we're hoping that maybe we can implement some of this next year and make some changes instructionally. So. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you guys very much for bringing. So we'll continue on with our, principals report. It has been uploaded in the folder. Just wanted to special shout outs and recognition. One is to Miss Jones, one of our parents who spearheaded activities for teacher appreciation. Again, as these ladies all have just heard, some of the challenges and celebrations that all they experienced in the class. And Miss Jones was able to facilitate our weeks of activities for teacher appreciation on both campuses. And she also was able to get support from other parents. So some came in, they made donations, and so we are super appreciative of that and helping us to celebrate young ladies here. In addition to that, also we are proud to announce that we had one of our teachers, Ms. Ford, she was awarded, or one of her grant ideas was funded through donors, and that was for foster the love of reading projects. And so we just kind of wanted to share that with you all as well today. And I'm going to get out of the way.
Okay, so our end of year data review. I was just gonna highlight what we talked about in our academic committee. Then I'm sure the academic committee will highlight a little more. So we kind of went over our reading end of the year projected proficiency. So as of right now, we're projected to be at 58%. For our reading proficiency, and at 63% for our math proficiency. We do have some work in the middle school that we do need to work on. We discussed a little bit with that as far as our middle school and our math and our reading, and as far as our MTSS goes and working with that. We did have a handle on that piece for AIG and for MTSS for elementary K-5, but we do have some work that we do need to do for middle school for next year. So those are the big things overall, arching growth as far as we need to go. I did upload the idea that you all can see as far as the check-ins, the beginning of year to the end of year growth that we have for those. We're kind of toying between the ideas of what to do with the check-ins. We're surveying our teachers as far as testing goes, whether we want to use that across the board or whether we want to use those individually for some of the teachers. Some of the teachers do find it useful. Some of the teachers do not find it useful as far as instruction goes and whether they're using it or not. So those are just some of the ideas that we're going back and forth with. It's kind of an overview of it.
So for curriculum and instruction, Mr. Cheek attended the TCM conference at the School of Math and Science in Durham in February. He attended the AP Calculus reading last year in Kansas City and has been invited back this year over the summer. He'll be doing that virtually this year. And he facilitated the ACT prep course after school here for our juniors. Ms. Coiter is teaching a math foundations class for those students who were not successful in math 1 and those whose already data indicated that they needed some extra instruction, those foundational skills. Ms. Coiter, Ms. Bryant, myself, Ms. Whitfield, Ms. Dockery, and Ms. Orr attended the professional development for honors level courses requirements. And we're going to do some training and development on those honors level courses.
So scheduling and advising, just a quick update. Revisions to the CCP guidelines or the Career and College Promise guidelines will be forthcoming upon completion of scheduling at Alamance Community College. They've encountered some scheduling challenges, at ACC, and that is opening up some opportunities for students to take an online 8-week course, if an in-person or hybrid option is not available. Students are required to take those in-person and hybrid classes on ACC's campus when the courses are available and work with their CGS schedule. So it's still very individual based, but we did want to update, everyone with that. Since there have been quite a few challenges for ACC, throughout this process. They're still scheduling our students. We have some that won't have an advising meeting until the end of May. So we're just working with them, as they kind of maneuver all the changes that they're going through.
So moving down into athletics, Coach Pascal has sent us a year in review, so to speak. So we have officially concluded our 24-25 season of sports. And so I just want to shout out a few of our notable statistics here. First, you all may be aware that we introduced 2 new teams for middle school and high school cheer. We had 49 individual and 3 varsity teams that were North Carolina Scholar athletes for the both fall and winter season. And we'll know more about the spring once the semester concludes. We also had 2 regular season champions, one in middle school and one in high school. 1 middle school tennis singles conference champion, 24 all-conference high school selections, 4 players of the year, 2 coaches of the year, and 8 junior marshal athletes. And those are also students that are participating in multiple sports. We also sent a special, I'm gonna read this verbatim as it says. She said, "I would like to thank the board of directors and administration for allowing me to lead the athletic program this year. It is a program that is growing year by year, and it's made up of the best kids, coaches, and families involved. I look forward to working to build for our students and have an even better athletic experience at CGS. Our next big project, we will set our sights on a batting facility at the high school campus." And then she says, "Also, I would like to invite our board of directors, that's you all, to our Growl Awards on Monday, May 19th at Trailhead Church, with the social hour starting at 5 and the ceremony will begin at 6. So please make note of that if you're available to come up to have.
And on to student life, we just wrapped up the middle school attendance challenge. We had 2 first place winners, winning Chick-fil-A breakfast for their classrooms. That was Miss Bellamy's room and Miss Newton and Miss Ord's combo room. And then the 2 runner-up classrooms just won, Miss Johnson and Miss Nicola's room. They won Hat Week, which a lot of the kids were excited about. And what we're doing is looking for ways to expand this to the other grade levels next year. And again, bring back some of that competitiveness, which we saw at the middle school level for attendance. Another exciting thing we did, was it last week or a week and a half ago? Miss Bellamy's career exploration class brought in some professionals to show them different things about maintenance and safety with automobiles. And then actually how to egress an automobile in case of an emergency situation. So, I mean, they learned very practical stuff. All the students were involved hands-on, asking questions. They changed the tire. They talked about changing oil. How do you get out of a car when it's submerged? So really, kids were very interested. And Miss Whittington, along with the local firefighter and paramedic, led that training. So very exciting for our kids. And health and safety, both campuses completed our fire drill last of the year.
That's it.
That's it for us.
That's it. Great job. Thank you very much for coming tonight. Appreciate it. Okay, so move into old business. Mr. Rakin, safety plan.
No updates at this time. We are currently getting quotes and scheduling installation of some of the things that we got approved for the safety grant.
Okay.
So I believe at the next meeting we'll have more updates as to how we're doing with that.
Okay. And what about the 2026 charter renewal? How are we doing?
Nothing at this time.
Okay, governance committee update. Governance committee, Ms. Merle?
No updates at this time.
Okay, finance, Ms. Lane?
We are having our annual budget meeting tomorrow. Looking forward to that.
Long range planning, Mr. Huffines.
No updates. It's fine.
And there are no updates for fundraising. Academic, Ms. Foster.
We met today and Ms. Whitfield gave us a lot of information on check-ins and she also showed us iReady and we saw some of the improvement that's being made. But I think just watching the teachers who presented tonight, you can see their interest is vested in these kids by the things that they're doing in their classrooms. And you all are going to be the ones that make the difference. So thank you so much. We appreciate the fact that we are looking into some new things maybe for next year to enhance what we already have and to make things even better. So again, you know, if it weren't for you guys over there, we couldn't do it. So thank you.
New business, middle school category weight change proposal.
I'll let them introduce themselves, but these ladies represent different departments in our middle school. They are looking at potentially changing some of our grade weights in our handbook. We did this several years ago, so it's time to kind of look at it and revisit our category weight. They have presentation data and review with you what it currently shows in our handbook and what we utilize, as well as what they would like to change it to for next school year, if possible, to better suit our children and how their classrooms are kind of laid out when it comes to our math and science areas.
I'm just not gonna give you one. Since you already said that. Thanks. Thank you.
Such a great job.
I am Jessica Taylor. I am 6th and 7th grade math this year. Do you want-
I'm Ms. Zachary and I teach math 7th and 8th grade.
That is Christine Johnson, and I teach 7th and 8th grade science.
So we noticed, and I've had this meeting for the parent this year, about our category weights for, especially I've noticed with math, it's not science, but we were lacking a classwork grade in math, and it made a big difference. So the purpose of us being here today is to look over the potential to change the grade weights that we have so that we can add in a classwork grade for math and kind of shuffle the categories around a little bit for science, but change some of the weights of each one of those so that we can better show the whole student. And there are examples as we go through this presentation that show, you know, if we have a kid who is a very good test taker, but they don't do their classwork or they don't do their homework, just the difference in the grade. And at the end of the day, the biggest thing is that, you know, we want to see what the kids are doing, not just what they're being tested on. And sometimes there are some kids that I have one girl in my 6th period. I love her. She's so smart, but she does not test well. And she has struggled all year to maintain a B, but she's not a B student. You know, that's just because I have nothing else that I can go by. That's just how the cookie crumbles for her. And so we're hoping that with these changes, we will have a change in our grading system that better reflects what our kids are actually in the classroom. So in your packet, there are terms in there just defined based off of what we use them in the classroom. So we have test, quiz, project, labs. We'll have to do some labs next year. And then our classwork and our homework categories. The classwork is the one that we're missing. So our current grading scale as it is in our handbook and on the website is that bridge grade scale for math. So you see 45% is tests, 35% is quizzes, 20% is homework. There is no classwork in there at all. So number one, we're not getting to put in grades for the work that they're doing every day in the classroom. But number two, they have no motivation to do their classwork because there's not a grade for it. So we have to shuffle things around and put things in as quizzes that aren't necessarily quizzes, and then put quizzes in as tests so that we can kind of try to balance things out. But it would just make it a lot easier if we could shift it a little bit and add in a classwork grade. So our proposed scale that we have over here on the right is to combine our tests and quizzes to 50%, because we feel like that's a fair representation of what they have mastered when they take an assessment.
And then we can have 40% classwork and labs, and then that remaining 10% by homework, because a lot of our kids, they're athletes, so they don't have a ton of time to get all of their homework done, or their parents might help them with it, and some kids don't have that ability. Some kids don't have parents at home that help them with their homework, but not parents that do all of their homework. So if we lower that percentage, but add it in for classwork, then we're gonna get a better feel of what the kids are actually doing and what they're actually doing.
And same with science. So I came into these categories because I had been in the past in elementary. So when I came into science, these categories were already presented to me of what we were using. So if you look, there's tests, labs and projects, quizzes and classwork, and homework are the exact same percentile. And I don't normally give homework. So I found myself, to balance the categories, having to put in classwork and other things. I would put in longer classworks into the homework category, just because some kids might have taken it home to complete it, or if they had to study for something. But I was just really divvying it up, so I had the same amount, in each category. Labs and projects, of course we do. But with tests, I assess them every day. I have bell ringers, I have exit tickets. We do all kinds of classwork activities and review, so I know where they are. And so when I go to take a test, I just found myself taking the time to do hands-on and learning and getting them ready to test. By that point, I needed to move on as far as pacing, right? And so it takes a lot of time to take a test with accommodations and separate setting and read alouds and setting all that up in a future advance. So it wasn't really showing me, or I felt like it was really kind of unbalanced. So our proposed is that we are moving to 45% is tests and projects, because we do a lot of projects, and it is a lot of quality time. And again, it helps that student that might not be a good tester, but is able to apply the information and tell me and explain it just as much as they would on taking a multiple choice, right? Or even better, I'm getting even deeper comprehension. And then of course, labs and quizzes, I want that to be a little bit less, because that's still the trial where they're practicing their mastery. And so it gives them a chance to kind of fumble. And so that by the time they get to the tests or the projects, they're ready to go. And then classwork is where the majority of my assignments are classworks. We do a lot of daily activities, vocabulary, lesson and applications, readings. I try to incorporate and integrate reading and math into my lessons as much as possible. So homework is just really not applicable to my classroom. And I also try to make sure that I'm there for their questions, so they don't have to take science home. And especially when we do more hands-on, it's kind of hard to take home homework that you're working on in class. And so since they're being homework with all their other classes, I try to be one that is reducing their amount of outside of the classroom work. So those categories are kind of wasted in my subject.
Okay, on this slide, we have as our grades are now, this is what a student would have. And we also have another spreadsheet if you're interested in seeing it that shows a breakdown of each thing. But as our grades are currently, if we ended up with these test, quiz, and homework grades, this student would end up with an 82.4 at the end of the quarter. Can you go into the next one? Yeah. But if we change our grading scale, they would end up with an 88.3. And it's more indicative of what they've learned in the classroom. That doesn't change them from a B. They're still a B. They're a solid B, but they're still a B. However, for those kids that are at 86, it's going to be the difference between a B and an A. For those kids that are at 76, it's the difference between a C and a B. And that can make a big difference. It's a pretty big jump for these kids. And all it is just helping that classwork, just shifting a little bit.
And those are exactly the same set of data points that they are using. It's just like what she said, we're just moving it around as to which ones, for example, that one, their test grade says originally 45%. And let's say that that's one grade point there. And that compromise gives 45% of the overall grade. But then the proposed one, it has been combined with the quiz grade, which is also the 80 grade. That's why it becomes 158 on the other side. Just looking at that, because it's gonna be so, if you look at, those are just both assessment, and it's making 80% of the grade of a student. And even in check-ins, we read it in our script that this, those scores are just data points. That doesn't define the student. But telling them that, and we are trying to give in this proposal the opportunity to show, for them to show that even if I'm not a test taker, if I do my best, I can make it. But that's in real world. Even if you are not the best person in your workplace, but if you are diligent enough, if you are trying your best enough, you'll make it. You'll make difference. So that's what we are trying to impose in this proposal that we're trying to put in here.
Okay, and same with science. Mine, categories aren't that significant. We did have a couple of students, if we had that other, yeah. So it wasn't a drastic shift for science, but it was able to show, like, for instance, I have a student who doesn't turn in a single piece of homework, not a single one. Doesn't do quizzes, doesn't do projects, but will absorb the material and make a decent quiz grade or test grade. And so with the current weight, he would come out to be E. Is he C? Okay.
The one without.
Is that the one?
It's letter, student B is the one not doing much of the work.
Okay.
So student B
Uh-huh.
does well, does do both 100 on the test.
Mhm.
They've got projects, 2 projects
Mhm.
and 1 lab grade. The second one is missing and never turn in classwork,
Mhm.
never turn in homework. That's a bit more.
Okay.
And then the current one.
And show what it would be on the current scale.
On the current scale, that student B, exactly the same data, it's going to be 40.
Okay, so now why I don't want the child to fail or have an even lower grade, they need to be accountable for. They're not going to, like, so let's say they did a little bit better on some of the other things, but never turned in homework, never did classwork, barely participated in class, and they were a little bit closer to passing. So there's a D. So when you look at this child and you say, you know what, they're ready to move on to the next grade level because they're not failing anything, but they're not doing anything. And so, but more so, the proposal that they're seeing with their weight changes is a lot more drastic than what you're going to see in science. I just like the categories to combine that if they're going to put in all that work into a project or a dissection or something, that should count as much as a test.
That goes with math too.
Yeah.
Okay, there's an example too for math. For example, it's pretty much the same what she's saying. Let's say, for example, student B, this one has 167 in 2 tests. We got good D's and B and A's in our quiz. Never turn in homework, 0 in everything, and that's still a 70.
So C.
So that, and then compared to a student who, let's say, student C, not let's say C and D for testing, C and D as well, or there's a 1B in a quiz, but tries hard to make sure she turns in everything, all homework. Well, there's no classwork, there's a lot of homework there because we put in everything. And even if we do it in the classroom, since there's nowhere for us to place it, we put it as a homework. Sometimes kids get it on us because they'll see in Canvas, it says homework. Ms. Dagger, can I finish it at home? Because it's homework. And if you really look at it, by definition, it is homework. So what can Ms. Dagger rebuttal on it unless we put it by the book that it is a classwork, you can't do it at home. And so, and that kid is only getting 77 because of those test grades that she's getting.
But then
But now show what.
The current, the proposed one with that new test, because the same data points, that students will go up to 87.
Wow, that's a big difference.
That's where the
And that's a
rest in there.
Motivator.
For the kids.
Yeah. That's one thing for us, because it breaks them. They try so hard.
And
They
I
try
was
so hard.
I've had this year so many student athletes stressing about math because there's no classwork grade and so much of our grade is just assessments. And so Fridays they would all come to me like, what is my grade? What is my grade? Am I going to get benched? And I'm, my hands are tied. I can only grade what I can grade and I can only put it where I can put it. And especially, there were some assignments that we had wanted to put in as quizzes, but were actually classwork. But then we got into the problem of, with the EC department, we couldn't put something in as classwork under the quiz category, because if it's put in under the quiz category, then you have to provide modifications for your EC students. So it became a lot of red tape, trying to figure out how can we do this to make it more equitable for these kids. And it's not happening without changing it. It's not gonna happen.
Same thing with science, absolutely. And so then that was so you can see, the next slide. Okay, so this is the proposal and it shows 83, and when you put them side by side, it's not too much of a difference, but again, look at how the categories could line up more, where they're able to show their efforts and the way that you combine the tests and the projects. I just really like.
But again, that can go, if that were an 89.41 and an 89.59, then the difference between B and an A.
Yeah.
Just no matter what. I really like the way you're weighting your homework, because my philosophy in middle school especially is that if you can get however many minutes you have them with good solid instruction, the homework is not so important. I mean, I agree, you have to do homework, but I like the way you're weighting that, because as you said, you have kids that don't have help at home, you have kids that go home to parents, and sometimes they just do it and don't care if it's right or wrong. They just write something down. And so I applaud you for going in that direction.
The last thing that we wanted to just put in your head for next year. The possibility of switching from points to percent grading.
The other one.
From percent to points, I'm sorry. Backwards. But just to look at it for your viewing pleasure later, whatever. The data points that are in the spreadsheet that she showed were calculated based off of percentage and based off of points. And if you look at the graph or chart, you can see there's a difference. It's not a drastic difference, but there is a difference. But also we were talking about having the students be more accountable for their work and knowing what their grade actually is. And if they know that they have to get 200 points in this to have an A, then they know what they need to work up to. It's not like, oh, I missed 5 questions out of 13. What's my grade? They know that they got 5 points towards those 200 points to get that A, and they can better pace themselves. They can
not stress over, a practice assignment that doesn't weigh as heavy as a quiz or something. But it's still all, I feel like it gives the student more idea of what they have and what the assignments mean, because I try to emphasize with my students, I don't give you busy work. I give you work to assess you. So what I'm doing is for you to take the material and apply it and play with it and then show me what you've learned. So everything counts. But there are times for practice too.
Another point for using points, because it could be a little tricky with the proposal that we're saying, because we are putting together tests, quizzes, and project as one category. And then the people might say, or I would also believe tests must weigh a little higher than a quiz because it's longer. So if you are going to use a point system, I can give my test, since it's longer, I can give 150 points and just give 75 points in my quiz, but they are still in one way category. But my test now weighs more because it has more points. Whereas if I use it as a percent, one test category is just equal to my one quiz category, regardless of how many points there are on my assessment. But the advantage of not putting them separately is that if I only have one test because I ran out of time and we need more practice in math, that one test will not cover the entire 40% of my grade. It's just still part of more pieces on that category. So it's gonna help if we're gonna be using points, but again, it's,
And
it's full of conversation.
it's a little bit, one more point is that it also shows the parent exactly how much the student missed. So if, let's say, based on, and I still have, they're still teaching me about the weight of it all, but let's say we did take a quiz and there was 5 questions, or no, what were we talking, if I took a quiz and I had 20 questions and the kid missed, but the way that it was weighted with the points, they still got like say 90, but they missed like 12, 13. It looks a little different to a parent when they think, oh, they got a 90, they must be understanding the material. But just because it was a smaller weight or percentage, it didn't count as much. And so that's what I think the parents would know. Okay, they got 8 out of 10 right, instead of just, the percentages. That's my
It's
fear.
almost like doing a rubric.
Yes,
Yes.
yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's what exactly is not, or what, that's why I want to push on the points, because I'm usually using rubrics on my assessment. And it's hard for me to really quantify if I change it to percent. But then, I think what one she was trying to say, let's just say, for example, I have a quiz, so let's just not a quiz or an assessment that's 5 points. If the student got 1 mistake, that's 4 out of 5. If you make it into a percent, that's 80 out of 100. So it's more points if in the next test they have more to catch up just because of 1 mistake that they did in the other ones. So that's one thing.
And in math, our quizzes are 5 questions. Our
Yes.
already quizzes are 5 questions. So it becomes problematic, when they make a simple mistake and it drops their grade down, and then there's so much we have to do to pull it back up.
Thank you. I like the initiative to start, because again, as we've seen this evening with all the presentations, we've got to start looking at things differently. Kids are learning differently nowadays. The consumption that they have outside of school and that interactive, I'm seeing a theme there with it really needs to be interactive, and the instruction has to be there to make sure we're getting across and they're comprehending. They're not just doing, but they're comprehending.
Yes.
What you're trying to teach. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Can I ask a couple of clarifying questions on the math scale? So for homework, so this has been my personal experience, and I just have 1 middle schooler here, so it's not, it's not the all being, anyway. The homework grade, do you guys grade homework on what they get right, or the fact that they have completed it?
In my class, it depends on the homework. So at the beginning of the year, the first quarter, a lot of it is completion. And then as they go through it, it becomes more of accuracy based. And I give them homework for the week. And then on Friday, they only turn in a few problems from each day. And then I check that for accuracy. Because it gives me a gauge of what they remembered from class, but it also helps to meet with my modifications person, my EC students. So it just depends on what it is.
Yep. Ours seems to is like kind of same as hers, accuracy kind of base, but I gave them a rubric for it's part of the instructions in their homework, and it says if you get 70 or better, you get full credit. So
that's what I do with the iReady. Sounds good. The past for 4th quarter, we were doing a lot of iReady and IXL homework.
Yeah.
And so I tell them 80% or higher, and it's 100.
Okay.
Okay. And then for classwork, I have not seen a lot of classwork in math in my middle schoolers class. So do you guys do a lot of classwork, or would it be a matter of, hey, we're going to make things classwork now to account for that 40%?
So what happens is why you're not seeing any classwork now, because there's no way for us to tag it as a classwork. So it was tagged as a homework. It was.
So there will be a separation.
That's why it will be separated now on the proposed one.
In my class, I used the problem solving workbook for already that I'm sure Miss Simmons loves, that I'm getting 1,000 copies a week. Literally 1,000 copies a week for that. But they have their student workbook, and we go through the guided practice together in there, and then they have the problem solving workbook portion that is their classwork. I can't name it. I think it's not where to put it.
So then when we get to the end of the lesson for the independent practice, I put it in as a quiz. So my classes, which I don't have Kate this year, but my classes keep all of their problem solving sheets that I make the copies of in their binder. And then they have their workbook, so they can take that one back and forth home. But the only grade that is actually visible in Canvas and Power School is the independent practice.
That's exactly what I wanted to know.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So any further,
Yes.
so any further questions about the weight change proposal?
There are two from percent to points and the weighting change. Were there two
So
out
that's
there?
part of the proposal,
You're
correct?
going to vote on the proposed.
Yeah.
The proposed.
Yeah.
Not the points and the percentages.
Oh.
Because more conversation needs to be had on the other stuff with that.
Yeah, that was just like.
Yeah.
Any questions? Further questions? You ready to take a vote? Please. Okay. So do I have a motion to? So we can get it on record. So do I have a motion to approve the middle school category weight change proposal as presented? Ms. Merle, second, Ms. Foster, all in favor? Thank you, ladies, very much.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else for open session? Do I have a motion to move into closed session under General Statute 143-318.11A 1, 5, and 6? Ms. Merle, second, Mr. Russell, all in favor? We have moved into closed session.